It's time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
On a Friday, and great to have you with us. A lot to do over the next 60 minutes. Final 60-minute edition of Sports Wrap for the week. But don't worry, the weekend edition is here for you. Or check out the podcast. All right, we got a busy show for you. Tino Pattigno, because it's a NASCAR Friday, of course, he will join us. Watkins Glen, the site of this weekend's playoff race for NASCAR. Our good friend Robert Littal, Black Sports Online, will join us for a segment, talk about some of the top stories of the week with his insights. And my man, Vlad Louisant, old producer of mine from back in the NBC Sports days. He does a good job. Hosts on weekends over at WQAM in Miami. Also produces there. He's going to join us. He was in the locker room post-game last night. Was at Hard Rock Stadium for the nightmare that was Dolphins-Bills. Well, if you're a Dolphins fan, it was a nightmare. Sam Yarnell. And the upper third reads, could there be a worse loss in week 2 of the NFL season? And I don't know if I could think of one. And again, we don't do hyperbole on this show. I don't do the, oh my God, the sky is falling. But it feels like the sky is falling for the Dolphins after a loss in which Tua is concussed. They couldn't do anything before he got hurt in that game. They certainly struggled to move the football. He had, I think, 3 interceptions. I mean, it was a disastrous night for the Miami Dolphins. But if you're Sam Yarnell, It was a joyous occasion, not because Tua got hurt. Nobody wishes that on Tua. That was really hard to watch again, and we'll get into that more so in the next segment than this one, Sam. But you had to love how your Bills looked last night.
Jason, the Buffalo Bills are still the beasts of the AFC East. I'm so glad that we spent so much time before the season talking about how good the Jets are going to be, and wow, they're the favorites to win the division now. And oh, here come the Dolphins. Don't forget about them either. And then the Bills go on the road in the division in prime time and obliterate a division foe who, in my opinion, had the best chance to contend with the Bills for the division title. Because when you look at that Dolphins team, and they even showed it last night, like they are still a well-rounded football team. They have good players at every position. They're deep 1 through 52 on the roster. So I still think there's a glimmer of hope there for Miami. And obviously, you mentioned it, Jason. We'll get into the Tua conversation in the next segment. But from a Bills perspective, this is exactly what you wanted to see. James Cook with a dominant game. By the way, hope you tailed James Cook rushing plus receiving yards because we cashed there. We cashed on the 2 interception. We cashed on the Bills money line. Jason said all the plays were correlated. They were. And
I said it was either going to go really well or really bad. And I would assume it went really well.
It went very well.
Except the over.
The over was a tough beat in this one, too, right? Because
Al Michaels was even talking about it towards the end of the game. It was great.
Well, we had 34 points in the first half, and there were 7 points in the second half.
Yep.
There were live numbers in the 50s for this game. Which, you have to at the same time understand the Bills side of a blowout, right? You're not going to just tack it on, especially when the franchise quarterback for the other side, who, they just gave the huge contract to, goes down. It's tough for overbackers, but at the end of the day, you'll take the loss because if you're backing the over, my prediction would be that you were also backing the Bills. That's just kind of how the betting script would play out for this game. So good day for the books, or good day for the bettors, bad day for the books. Happy with the Prince's picks and the Prince's people. We can eat meat this week.
Well, look, I mean, you got to wonder what all of this means for Miami long term. Ryan Tannehill, line 1. I mean, it's not as if he hasn't played in Miami before. I'm still not ready to coronate the Bills for that division. They still have to play the Jets twice. We don't know what the Jets are ultimately going to be. I won't take week 1 and go crazy with it. In fact, I won't even take the first 3 weeks and go crazy about the Jets because they got handed a really difficult first 3 weeks of the season, between the Monday night game, short week, back on the road. Then I think they have another short week because next Thursday night they get the Patriots. So the Jets for the first 3 weeks kind of got hit in the face with a sledgehammer as far as the schedule maker was concerned. So I'm not even going to go. I'm not ready to coronate the Bills just yet. It's a little early to do that.
I just think this goes back to a conversation that you and I had either earlier this week or last week. I can't remember which, but it was on Monday because it was talking about the Deshaun Watson thing. Jameis Winston's value just skyrocketed. It's skyrocketed because Jameis Winston is the exact kind of quarterback that the Miami Dolphins could take and make a deep playoff run. Obviously, we don't know how this whole Tua thing is going to play out, how long he'll be out for. Ryan Tannehill's an interesting mention. Obviously, Tom Brady is the one that everyone wants to jump to. People don't realize that Roger Goodell is going to do everything in his power to make sure that now that Tom Brady owns part of the Raiders, there's no chance he's ever going to play football ever again in the National Football League.
I mean, how about this, though? I mean, other guys on the couch, Colt McCoy, Nick Foles, do you start making those calls? I mean,
you ready? If I'm Miami, there are 2 calls that I make. I mentioned Jameis Winston, and that's because, and Jason, you've caught on to this at this point, I'm way too high on Jameis Winston. I think he's way too fun of a quarterback to ride the bench somewhere in the NFL. Like, how do we not have this guy playing every week? Anyway,
he's Jeff George. He's Jeff George.
Jameis Winston is my first call. I'm calling Cleveland. I'd offer him a 4th round pick for him. Then if they say no, my next call is New England. I want Jacoby Brissett. Jump to Drake May now. You were going to do it eventually. Do it 3 weeks earlier than you originally planned to. Give me Jacoby Brissett because I'll make him a playoff quarterback.
Yeah, they can't win with Skylar Thompson or
they can't win with Colt McCoy or Ryan We already saw Ryan Tannehill in this offense and it didn't go well.
No, not with Tyreek Hill and Waddle. I think you could actually win. I think he can manage the offense.
So he couldn't do it with Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins, but he'll do it with Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane? I don't think so.
Look, if those teams want to hold you over the barrel to try and get Brissett or Jameis Winston, I don't know if that's a move to make. We'll talk about it coming up in a couple minutes. Vlad Lewisant will join us on SportsWrap next. We keep things moving on this Friday edition of SportsWrap. We will be joined by Robert Littal, Black Sports Online. Get some thoughts with him on the top stories of the week. Tino Pattigno still to come on NASCAR. Playoffs move to Watkins Glen. Top story has to be the Tua Tagovailoa injury last night, the loss for the Dolphins at home, getting throttled by the Bills, who they were getting throttled by before Tua got hurt, let alone what happened after he got hurt. Where they couldn't do anything offensively. And now the focus shifts to where does Miami go from here? For part of that conversation, we're bringing my man Vladimir Lewisant, who does a great job, WQAM radio in Miami. Longtime friend of Jason Page as well. Worked with me on my NBC Sports radio show back in the day. And somebody who I can trust on anything Miami related, as he is in the belly of the beast. He was at the game last night in the locker room post game. He hosts a weekend show as well over at WQAM. All right, Vlad, what was the scene like? Set it for me. Locker room last night after this game ended. What were some of the things you were hearing?
It was a somber locker room last night after the game. They just wanted to make sure that there you go. They wanted to make sure that their quarterback, their teammate, was well, and he was. They talked to him after the game in the locker room. He was talking to many of his teammates. But as a team that's lost 11 out of 12 to Buffalo, and this was a statement game, this was the worst night that they can have, because not only they lost to their AFC division rival, but then they lost their quarterback. And right now, the talk of the town right now, I'm producing a morning show right now, is they want to know, should he retire? And they just paid him they just gave him a $220 million contract extension, and $167 million is guaranteed. And I think after that last season, they thought him playing all 18 games, including the wild card, they thought that everything was corrected. And you're always in this game one hit away, Jason and Samuel. So the fact that it happened again on national TV Thursday night against the Bills, Damar Hamlin, it was too much was going on. But right now they have a lot to consider, because I don't know if they really believe in Skylar Thompson to play the rest of the season, especially, you're 0-2, but you still can salvage the season, but I don't know if you do it with Skylar Thompson.
Vlad, we mentioned, Jason and I did in the last segment, Ryan Tannehill is a guy who's familiar with Miami. Have you heard any rumblings, maybe going out and getting him off the couch, bringing him out of retirement?
They haven't Ryan Tannehill has been talked about being the backup quarterback since training camp opened, when Mike White and Skylar Thompson were competing, and nobody was happy with what was going on. And after that, they did not want whatchamacallit to give away. They did not want to give him away. They didn't want to they didn't want to go back to Ryan Tannehill. The fan base wants this Ryan Tannehill back, but you could tell management does not want Ryan Tannehill back, because if they did, they would have signed him. Mike White got let go. They signed Tim Boyle, who was on the Jets, as the third quarterback. And you can't do that if you're really trying to compete, because Tim Boyle stunk last year. So therefore, what I'm saying is they could try to get Ryan Tannehill. Green Bay did not call Ryan Tannehill after Jordan Love sprained his MCL. So I don't know if Ryan, and he's saying he wants the perfect situation. So I don't know what Ryan Tannehill really wants. But
hey, Vlad, and by the way, for people who are wondering, Vlad's literally working on a show while he's talking to us. So this is like the multitask of multitasks right now with Vlad, who's working on a show at WQAM and talking to us at the same time. This is fun. This is fun watching you do this, Vlad.
No, I'm not.
All right. Tell me something, Vlad, real quick. Not all concussions are created equal.
I'm doing a show.
Yeah, see, there you go. Not all concussions are created equal, Vlad.
Right.
This did not look, with him walking off the field under his own power, it did not look like your concussion that you saw with Tua in the past. Is there hope that he can return quickly from this because of the fact that it didn't look as severe in the moment?
They still got to do the doctors. Doctors got to check him because of the fact that they've had this situation before, and they don't want to be called out. They don't want to be called out from the last time that they had done this situation. They had this concussion happen before. So therefore, it's going to be, at least to me, they got to bye week 6, right? So they play Seattle week 3. They play Tennessee Monday night, and then I think they go to Indianapolis, and then Indianapolis or New England, one of those games, and then they have the bye week. If he does come back anytime shortly, to me it would be the bye week. But this is going to be, I don't know how this is going to play, because you're going to have public outcry and you're going to have team outcry. And if the doctors say that he's able to, they clear him and he's able to play, then it's going to see what's he going to do. If he's not able clear to play, then they get talked about the contract, because he's only played 2 games of the guarantee right now. So, it's going to be very, very interesting how this plays out, because this was always going to be a factor. but everybody thought after the 18 games he was going to be good, and that didn't happen.
Real quick before I let you go, I only got about 45 seconds here. Any chance they would trade a draft pick for like a Jacoby Brissett, call the Patriots, maybe a Jameis Winston in Cleveland?
Well, there was also talk about, Mr. Limitless, Russell Wilson. If they, to see if any, I know, Sambo, but you got to salvage the season somehow. It's only 2 games in, so maybe, but I don't know. They haven't discussed this. No, the only thing I can say, my last thing I can say was that, going down to the locker room right before the game ended, I saw Stephen Ross and Dan Marino, and Stephen Ross looked ill. Like he looked like he just saw a ghost because he just saw his $220 million investment just get rocked. And the thing about his concussions, Jason, is always the fingers and the way they're moving. That's a different type of like concussion. Yeah. So that's why I think they're very worried.
All right. Vlad, appreciate it. We'll talk soon. Something to consider a little later on in the show. Tino Pattigno coming up in 10 minutes to talk NASCAR because it is Friday. But first, got to talk a little bit of the week that was. And who better to encapsulate all that than our good friend Robert Littal of Black Sports Online, founder of that website, who hangs out with us on SportsWrap. All right, Robert, I got 3 I want to get to you with real quick, so we're going to run through these. 1, the Tua injury. We all saw it last night. Obviously, another concussion for him, and it leaves a lot of people wondering if he should ever play again. And at some point, you wonder who's going to protect Tua from himself. Yeah, eventually, doctors are going to come out and clear him to play. But we all know at this point he probably shouldn't. I think of Eric Lindros and kind of what happened with him during his career with the Flyers and all the concussions, and you just start to wonder, is the writing on the wall for Tua?
He's going to play. And I know a lot of people there's going to be a lot of shows and a lot of talking heads, and we're going to talk about it for a week or so. But in 2-3 weeks, so like you said, somebody's going to clear him, and he's going to play. I think with Tua, it's because it always seems to happen on national television. It always happens in front of. But Tua's not what I would call a unique situation. There are players out there that are playing with 4, 5, 6, 7. No telling how many concussions they've had, over the years. And obviously, there's the concussion situation with the lawsuits and things of that nature. I think Tua brings a light to it. But, he's a football player, and what he loves to do is play football. And if there's a doctor out there that will clear him and say, hey, he's no more susceptible than Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, he'll be back out there on the field. And it'd just be scary every time that, he does, drop back. But he did play 17 games last year, so he's capable, of doing it. He just needs to do a better job protecting himself.
All right, let's talk about politics and sports. You heard Patrick Mahomes come out and say, hey, my wife's going to do what she's going to do, but I'm not going to endorse anybody. And I went off on that whole thing yesterday on the show because Patrick Mahomes' wife can endorse somebody, but Patrick Mahomes can't. That whole thing is bizarre to me. Nature of their relationship, whatever that may be. Caitlin Clark has come out now and made her own statement regarding supporting somebody because people saw on Facebook or on Instagram, she liked Taylor Swift's post supporting Kamala Harris. This was Caitlin Clark talking about whether or not she would endorse a candidate. Christine Brennan asking the question. Listen.
Caitlin, you liked an Instagram post last night from Taylor Swift that got a lot of attention. And I'm just curious if you could tell us what that post meant to you and if you are in fact potentially going to endorse Kamala Harris. Thank you.
I think for myself is, I have this amazing platform, so I think the biggest thing would be just to encourage people to register to vote. I think for myself, this is the second time I can vote in an election. At age 22, I could vote when I was 18, so I think do that. That's the biggest thing I can do with the platform that I have, and that's the same thing Taylor did. And I think continue to educate yourself with the candidates that we have, the policies that they're supporting. I think that's the biggest thing you can do, and that's what I would recommend to every single person that has that opportunity in our country.
Go, Scott. Robert Littal, do professional athletes have a responsibility with their platform to do more than just say go out and vote? Or is that enough for you?
I think it's their choice. They get paid to play a sport, and they're celebrities and they're athletes, meaning that we really shouldn't care, who they vote for. They're just like us. There's no difference between, you and me. When you have such a divisive type of country, I think at times you want someone to make a strong stance on something to help, because you're like, help me, Caitlin. I don't want to, end up like we were before, depending on which candidate, that you prefer. I think she clearly was ready for the question. I wouldn't be surprised if she was told it was coming beforehand. But here's the thing that I sympathize with athletes. If she was to do it, either way, there's so much blowback from the trolls. There's so much blowback from the fans. There's so much conversation on social media that it can be, overwhelming. I do believe Patrick Mahomes, winning Super Bowls and being Patrick Mahomes, has a stronger standing to say, and whoever he wants to say. Caitlin is too much toxicity with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and all of this in the WNBA right now to also take a step into politics. I think they need to handle one thing at a time. How about just being a little bit nicer to Caitlin and the fact that she's bringing all of these eyes to the WNBA?
I only got about a minute. I need your thoughts on Shannon Sharpe, the IG live video seen all over the place where he was clearly having some sort of relations with another woman. He has admitted as much. What do you make of the way it's been handled by Shannon and the fact that doesn't seem to be a lot of blowback from people that employ him?
Well, put your phone in the living room before you go in the bedroom. That's the first thing that you need to do. Secondly, we're in an unserious society. So out of all of the things that are going on in the world right now, when we have presidential candidates saying that people are eating cats and dogs, Shannon Sharpe playing a little backgammon, for a minute. I think it would have been a lot different if some faces were involved and some naked bodies. But the fact that, it was just some audio, that's probably number 36 of the 150,000 things that are going on in our world right now that we should take a little bit more seriously.
Do you believe, I only got a second here, so I need just a quick yes or no on this. Do you believe it was an accident? Like, could you really do that by accident?
Yes, because I've seen it happen before to people that aren't famous. Your phone is, the iPhone, and this is real quick, the iPhone is so sensitive that, my daughter has called people, text people. I've accidentally been on live. It happens. It just never happens when, you're getting it on.
That is Robert Littal, Black Sports Online founder. We'll see you next week.
Getting it on.
All right, still to come, we've got Tino Pattigno dropping by the show. We'll get some thoughts with him on NASCAR. Odds and ends, not today, because we've got Paige versus the Prince, Sam Yarnell and myself facing off to see who could pick more NFL games correctly. He did well last week. He went 3-1. I went just 2-2. Something to consider is also coming up a little later on in the show. We got to talk about a couple of interesting baseball stories. One involving a player who did something that is just unthinkable in the minor leagues. We'll tell you about that. You may not have heard this story, but you will if you haven't heard it by now. Also, what's going on with the Oakland A's? Will they be back in Oakland next year? Is the MLB Players Association going to allow them to play in Sacramento? We'll talk about that too. But Tino Pattigno joins us next. The NASCAR playoffs are in Watkins Glen this week. We'll get all the latest from him. All right, it's time to talk some NASCAR. The field of 16 is down to 12. It'll get down to 8 this week, right, Tino Pattigno? Our NASCAR insider, right?
After the round of 16, we got 2 more races, then the round of 12, and then 3 more races, then there. Yeah.
God, they drag this thing out enough, don't they?
Yeah. It's a long process.
It is a long process, but that's what we love about NASCAR. So 16 to 12 to 8 to 4 to 2.
No, then that's the
it.
champion.
Final Four is it. Okay, we finally get a
There you
champion after the Final Four. All right. Hey, listen, this has been the most NASCAR I've ever watched in my life. It has been so much fun having you on throughout the season and kind of helping us dissect what goes on week to week. So talk to me about Atlanta before we get to Watkins Glen and what's always a fun race with 7 turns, 90 laps. Some guys that get into the race that you don't typically see in NASCAR, talk about in NASCAR. Before we get to that, Joey Logano wins in Atlanta last week. An exciting race. I watched the highlights. I did not get to watch the race live as I typically would, but tell people a little bit about what happened in Atlanta.
So Atlanta, the track changed a lot from the last time we were there earlier this season, in which when we saw the 3-wide photo finish with Daniel Suarez, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Busch. The thing that was important to note there was the Fords. The Fords were strong. Joey Logano, like you said, locks himself into the next round with that win. Well, for Joey Logano, it's an even year. For everyone, it's an even year. But the point of that is he is just stronger on the even year. For the last, I believe, 5 to 6 years now, he's made the championship 4 all on even years. So could this be Logano? Last week we talked about when he was 16-1 to win the championship. He goes out and wins Atlanta in an even year. I'd like to think Joey Logano, even year, could have another shot at it in this one. The Fords look strong, like I mentioned there, too, which is key as we move forward in the rounds, as each driver for Team Penske is in the playoffs and looks like they're in a position to advance right now. For drivers like Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin, the top 2 class of the field, terrible days. Kyle Larson wrecked out. He was in a position, within the top 3 there. He lost control of his car, slammed into the wall. It did not have a good, ended up finishing within the last couple of positions there. And Denny Hamlin rode around in the back all day because he was racing out of data and racing for stats there in terms of he wanted just 20 points to move on. And ultimately, he did get involved in a wreck at the end. So this track was interesting to see the race played out with the Fords being on top and the 2 top guys being at the bottom.
All right. Put Atlanta to the side now. Watkins Glen this week. Go bowling at the Glen, I believe is what it's called. Talk to me a little bit about this race because it's obviously different. As I said, you've got 90 laps, 7 different turns, the changes in elevation, different drivers that come in here that sort of cherry pick this race as a spot where they could potentially win and get a victory. We were talking about it before we came on the air today. One of those guys, Shane Van Gisbergen, who's the second favorite right now, according to FanDuel at plus 700, who most people aren't familiar with unless you're a real NASCAR sort of inside guy. You've got Kyle Larson, your favorite, at 650. He's won this race twice. You've got Chase Elliott going off at 1100. He's won this race twice. And don't forget William Byron, who won it last year, who's going off at plus 800. A lot of guys who obviously have the chops for this track and for this race. Talk to me about where you're looking this week.
Well, I'm looking at Chevy for the exact reason you mentioned. All those drivers, it all happened in a row. Chase Elliott was 2, Kyle Larson 2, then William Byron last year. The reason that is they're all part of the same team. They're all some of the best drivers in the field. So the 5 out of the 5 last years, it's been Chevy dominant. Those drivers being all part of the same team, like I mentioned, continuously winning this race and performing well at this track. One stat I want to throw out there for you, Jason, is in 16 of the last 20 races at Watkins Glen, the winner has started inside the top 6. So going into this race weekend, we need to be aware of who's strong at qualifying at this track. There is a new tire compound that will be introduced for this race. It says to have more fall off, to have better racing, more passing between the cars, and ultimately stronger drivers will prevail in managing their stuff.
Can I ask you something? Can I ask you something though, just before I forget? You mentioned this new tire compound, and this is where NASCAR loses me sometimes. How in the middle of a season or in the middle of the playoffs are you introducing new elements into what these drivers have to get ready for, what these crews have to get ready for? It just seems bizarre to me. Like, it'd be like if the NFL decided, you know what, this whole kickoff thing, we're going to scrap it during the playoff. We're going to go back to old kickoff. Like, I don't understand how NASCAR does this.
Well, honestly, some drivers and teams don't either, and you only have test sessions that only allow one driver from each manufacturer, so 3 drivers total to test this out, earlier on. So everyone else in the field, the other remaining 33 plus drivers, are not able to understand what's going to happen before practice. And what about practice? Well, it's only 20 minutes this weekend, so you really do not have that much time to figure it out. I think the common consensus in the garage is the fact that it won't matter too much. This could be overblown, but the fact of the matter is, if it's not, we could see something happen like Bristol earlier this year, where that tire compound was crazy and the racing was incredible. So we will see. I think that's something that's important to note. And another driver that could prevail from that is Kyle Larson. Like you mentioned, he is the favorite. It won't be a flashy pick in this one, but for him to win outright plus 650, he has qualified inside the top 6 in the last 8 races at this track. So keep an eye on him. Chase Elliott, 2 other drivers with closing line value. We'll see Christopher Bell 14-1, and Ty Gibbs could get his first career victory at this track.
Wow. Anybody further down that you're looking at? How'd Kyle Busch look last week?
Kyle Busch was up there. He's been running strong. He was the only driver not in the playoffs to finish inside the top 10. So he stays hot. In this one, I'm not sure if he could prevail. He's 25-1 to do so. I'd also keep an eye on Chris Buescher, who has a strong resume at road courses, 30-1 to be an underdog pick here.
Keep an eye on Tino's X at Tino Pattigno. He'll also be putting picks up there as we get closer to the race. He's going to the race. Enjoy it, my friend. I expect to see lots of fun video. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Let's turn left and right this weekend.
Thanks to Tino Pattigno for dropping by the show, as always, to talk NASCAR. We move from NASCAR to something to consider. Odds and ends coming up in 10 minutes as well, but no odds and ends today. It's Friday, which means Paige versus the Prince. In the battle for picking supremacy. But Sammy Arnell, something to consider. A couple of interesting baseball stories that crossed my screen, my desk. I don't want to say my desk. It just sounds like I'm working in a newsroom somewhere. 2 stories of interest. One involving a major league team that sometimes operates like a minor league team, and a minor league baseball player. If you don't know who Derek Bender is, you do now. I guess this is one way to be famous. A former 6th-round pick of the Minnesota Twins, no longer with the Minnesota Twins. They cut the minor league catcher after it was revealed he was tipping pitches to hitters, telling them what was coming. And doing it in the playoffs, no less, Sam Yarnell. What on earth could motivate somebody to do something so stupid?
Not only just a 6th-round draft pick, a 6th-round draft pick 2 months ago. The guy was drafted this July and just came up and was like, yeah, I'll just tell these other guys what's coming at him. It's an interesting philosophy. It really is.
For what? I don't understand. What would be the purpose?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure either. But what I will say is the thing that still doesn't make sense to me, and I haven't found it in any of the stories I've read about this, is how he got caught. Like, did one of the opposing players tell one of his teammates that, like, what?
According to the story, coaches for Lakeland so apparently Fort Myers, which is who he was playing for, their coaches were notified by Lakeland coaches about Bender's pitch tipping after the game. Bender's willingness, according to the story on ESPN, Bender's willingness to tip pitches surprised Lakeland players, and there were no indications of wrongdoing from the Flying Tigers. Bender had told teammates he wanted the season to be over, according to sources. So he was tipping pitches so they would lose, which they did lose the series, because he just wanted to be done with it. He was over it. He was done.
Again, if you're one of the opposing players, I don't get how you can let this get out. The fact that they, even after the series, like, I feel like, not that it's an unwritten rule of baseball, because it's very clearly not, but it's within the bounds of the unwritten rules of baseball that if a guy's doing this, just accept it and don't tell anyone about it. I mean, I don't know. If a pitcher is tipping pitches, the manager for the other team who he was tipping pitches against doesn't go up and tell the team's manager for whom he pitched after the game. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Nope. It is bizarre. Good riddance. Derek Bender probably won't play another. Could you imagine just throwing away all that work and effort and sacrifice to get into professional baseball? I can't.
I'd give him another shot.
Oh, God, no. How could you trust him? Especially in a position that's so important like catcher. That's like a field general. You can't.
Yeah. Right. So I'd give him another shot. You can't be a catcher anymore. I'll put him in left field, put him at first base. He played baseball at Coastal Carolina. That is a renowned baseball program. And he was a top 10 round draft pick. That's like, they just threw away a decent chunk of change. I don't know, Jason. I would give the guy another. If I'm another organization, I'm calling him up and saying, hey, you want to play first base?
Where will the Oakland A's play next year? It seems to be a source of great controversy. It had all been figured out that they were going to play next year in Sacramento while their stadium in Las Vegas gets done, if Vegas even wants them. But that's another topic entirely as somebody who lives in Las Vegas. Now, the Major League Baseball Players Association is saying, not so fast, Lee Harvey. They may not wind up playing in Sacramento next year. They've already told Sacramento, by the way, even if we play there and we make the playoffs, you're not getting the playoff games. We're going to play them at a neutral site. They are screwing over Vivek Ranadive and that Sacramento AAA team already before they even get there. Another topic entirely, though. Rob Manfred, meanwhile, is saying it is 100% certain the team's playing in Sacramento this year. You have a standoff between the MLBPA and MLB on this issue. The stadium is not really MLB ready. The temperatures there in the summer in Sacramento, I could vouch for this, are going to be scorching hot. So I don't know how they're going to play games in that kind of weather. There are some in Oakland hoping the team will be back there for another year next year while they convince Major League Baseball to force John Fisher to sell the team. There you go.
I never thought I'd say this. I really didn't. But I think the last thing you said might be the most probable outcome at this point. This has become a scab on the reputation of Major League Baseball within like a bunch of different communities now. We've seen teachers unions organize about the Oakland Athletics and not coming to Las Vegas. We've seen politicians get very upset, as Jason was just talking about, with where they're going to play and how the plan is being made and also executed. Major League Baseball is making a lot of people unhappy with all this. Jason, I don't know where they're going to play. I think it's Oakland.
I got a hunch it's going to be Oakland, too. I'm just hoping they force Fisher to sell. We're coming back. Page versus the Prince is next. All right, just about time to put the wraps on this baby for a Friday. If you miss anything from the show, anything at all, Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast is there for you. Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio. And on the Spotify version, you can actually watch the show the same way it looks on television. It's great. And don't forget, Sports Wrap Weekends, the 30-minute show, available on many of these same affiliates. If not, go and call your affiliate and say, I want Sports Wrap Weekends. If you watch the show Monday through Friday, you're not missing anything. It's a recap of everything we talked about from the week that was. All right, without any further delay, Sam Yarnell, time for...
It's Friday, and that means it's time for the weekly face-off for sports betting bragging rights. It's Paige versus the Prince on the Sports Wrap.
All right, Sam Yarnell, Paige versus the Prince, week 2. Week 1 went the way of Sam Yarnell. He was 3-1. I was 2-2. Respectable for week 1. I'm not gonna complain with a 2-2 week 1. It's very hard to pick the NFL early in the season because, as I always like to point out to Sam, teams don't know they suck yet. All right, Sam Yarnell, you went first last week. I'll go first this week. Maybe it'll change my fortunes a little bit. Need some better juju. Let's start in Jacksonville. Jaguars coming off a bad loss in week 1 against Miami, at home against the Browns. I expect the Jags to rebound. And who has confidence in Cleveland right now? Cleveland wasn't very good away from home last year either. That team is in turmoil right now with the Deshaun Watson situation. I will go Jacksonville -3, game 1. Game 2, there's no way the Jets are going to be 0-2 after week 2. There's no way. Everything tells me I should take the Titans because the shorter week, the Jets, having to play on Monday night, then go play there. The first 3 weeks kind of suck for them. Take it all, throw it out the window. In Aaron Rodgers, we trust. Not anything non-football related, but on the football field, I trust Aaron Rodgers. There's no way the Jets could play worse than they did on Monday night. I expect them to play much better in week 2. Give me the Jets -3.5 for game number 2. The Seahawks and Patriots in Foxborough. I actually think the Patriots are going to win. The Patriots are going to be 2-0 after the first 2 weeks of the season. Just saying. But the pick that I'm going with for this game is the total. I don't expect a lot of points. Seattle having to travel across the country. I'll take the under 38.5 on the Seahawks and Patriots in Foxborough. Fourth game, Bears and Texans in Houston, Sam Yarnell. Give me under 45.5. Not expecting a lot of points in that game. We kind of saw what the Bears offense did last week. I don't expect it to be a heck of a lot better. I think Houston wins the game, but I don't expect a ton of points in that game. Give me under 45.5 on the Bears and Texans in Houston. So the Jags -3, the Jets -3.5. Seahawks and Patriots under 38.5 and under 45.5 in Bears Texans. Sam, you're up. You got 2 minutes. Go.
All right, Jason, I'll also start in Jacksonville, I should say, with the Browns and Jaguars. I don't know who's going to win this game, but I know it's going to be a rock fight. Give me under 41.5 in Cleveland and Jacksonville. Listen, bad offense against good defense and bad offense against good defense. We saw that the Jaguars have made no progression through the offseason in week 1 against Miami, and now they're going up against a very formidable Cleveland defense. And then on the other side, you mentioned the Deshaun Watson thing. We don't know what this Browns offense is anymore, and that Jaguars defense is at the very least league average, right? So I'll start with the Browns Jaguars under 41.5. We'll go to Carolina next. Listen, not all teams know they're bad this early in the season, Jason. You mentioned it. The Carolina Panthers know they're bad. They haven't been good in years. Give me the LA Chargers -4.5 on the road. I trust LA going across the country to win this game by more than a touchdown. Down to Southern Maryland, where the Commanders host the Giants. Talk about teams that are bad. The Giants are not good. Daniel Jones is not good. And I know Emmanuel Forbes is going to undergo surgery for the Commanders, I guess, which is a blow to their secondary. I would still bet Daniel Jones to throw an interception. Give me Commanders -1.5 in that game. Right. And then the Niners -5.5 against the Vikings. Vikings are lost right now. The Niners are a very good team. We saw it against the Jets on Monday night. They'll win this game by a touchdown or more. Under 41.5 in Browns Jags. Chargers -4.5. Commanders -1.5. Niners -5.5. Jason.
How could you say the Vikings are lost? They just throttled the Giants last week.
You're
I
going
don't
to look at me in the
understand.
face and tell me that a team, sure, you scored 28 points against a AAA football team. Congratulations. You've got Sam Darnold as your quarterback. Their defense looked okay against what? The second worst offense in the National Football League? No.
All right. It's going to put the wraps on us for the week. Thanks to you, Sam Yarnell. Thank you, Tino Pattigno. Thank you, Robert Littal, Vlad Lewisant. I'm Jason Page. We'll see you all back here on Monday for another edition of Sports Wrap. Have a great weekend.